Ooika 引き立ての抹茶をアメリカで。
Hey everyone, it's Mark from Ooika, and today I am at the tea house here, as you can see by the beautiful wood and shikui walls and the tatami here and a kama, and we're going to learn all about what this is specifically in the month of November, where there are two very important events that happen. Now, the person that I have here is Drew Sodo Hanson.
I'm Drew Hanson, and Sodo is my tea name, which I was granted by the Grand Master of Urasenke in 2010, actually. So I've been using Sodo since then. I've been now at this practice for 28 years, and I'm enjoying my teaching and the demonstrations that we do for the public. Urasenke is one of the tea schools that originated in Japan in the late 1500s and into the 1600s. And there are three tea schools that are associated with a particular family, the Sen family. And the three schools are related but different. And Urasenke is the largest in terms of practitioners in the world. There are Urasenke chapters all over the world. I think the only place that there are none is in Antarctica. And we have a group in Philadelphia. There's one in New York and one in Washington, D.C.
So when you say tea, is that all tea? Is that Chinese tea, Japanese tea? What does tea mean?
In our practice, we only use matcha, which is a powdered green tea. The leaves have been ground into a very, very fine powder, and that is incorporated into the hot water in suspension.
So Urasenke is a tea school.
Yes.
And what exactly are you teaching? What is the subject of the school? Is it just drinking matcha?
It is, well, there is a curriculum that a student can proceed through. To master the curriculum takes 10 to 15 years. And after you have mastered the curriculum, your teacher will decide whether you pass, as it were, and are granted a tea name. Along the way, you get various kyojo, which are like permissions to continue your study. And as you progress through, you also receive permissions to teach. Cha do, the word do simply means way. And this is the way of tea, simply a pathway that we follow in our practice. And it is a meditative process, but it's also an intellectual and emotional process.
In November, there's a number of events that happen in both the production side of the tea world, but also what I would call the art side of the tea world. One of the events is there's a jar called the chatsubo, which is packed with tea. So after the harvest, the leaves are picked, they're put in the jar, and then they're left to age, just like you'd age a wine or age a scotch. And after that aging process of about 6 months in November, that jar is cut open. So it wouldn't be usually the producer that cuts the jar open. It would usually be the customer or the tea school, and they would cut it open, and there's an entire ceremony that's around the cutting of the mouth of the jar, which is called kuchi-kiri, which is mouth cut.
Yes.
So how does the aging of matcha and the cutting of the jar play into what you do here in the tea room? Why is that an important event?
At the beginning of November, the tea room is reorganized for the winter season, which we say begins at the beginning of November. The source of heat, which during the summer season has been as far away from the guests as possible, has moved into the center of the room. And the kettle, the kama that we use, is cast iron. And so as it heats, it radiates warmth through the room. And of course, in the days before there was central heating, this was the heat source in the room for the winter. And so the beginning of November, we say, is the beginning of the new tea year, because it is at that time that the tsubo is opened and the new tea is ground for the first time and served for the first time. And so people who are your guests are getting the first taste of the New Year's tea. Because the tea had been picked 6 months ago, steamed and dried and packed away in these large ceramic jars. And so when it is opened, there are typically two types of tea that are in the jar. The jar is basically filled with the tea leaves that are going to be used for usucha, the thin tea. And also in the tsubo, there will be little packets in which the best leaves have been packed. And those are the leaves that'll be ground and used for koicha, the thick tea. But they're both in the same jar. The individual bags are taken out, and then the rest of the tea leaves are dumped into a wooden trough. The person who is doing the presentation empties the tea into various containers that are out for display. So the people who are watching see the tea being separated. And then typically after that, the jar is closed up again. It's empty now. And a net, a sort of a corded net in that bright vermilion color is tied in a very special knot over the jar. And it often is then put into the tokonoma as a display item. But then the tea is taken from the tea room into the mizuya, into the preparation room. And typically after that, a light meal is served to the guests. And while the guests are eating, they hear the leaves being ground. I mean, that's the way, it was done typically, in the old days.
Yeah.
So you hear the sound of that stone mill grinding the tea that you are going to taste.
So in the Tea New Year, they would be having not just the first opening of the aged tea, but they'd also be grinding it fresh and tasting it immediately after milling.
Yes.
It takes a lot of time and effort to produce a very small amount of matcha, especially with a hand mill. And koicha, if I understand, is a very thick tea, which requires a lot of matcha powder in a small amount of water. So you'd have to, for many guests, really be milling a long time. So I guess the meal is a good opportunity to do that.
Yeah, and the meal should be leisurely. There's no reason to rush. And so you kind of enjoy the community of guests. And there's conversation as you're enjoying the food that has been prepared. When that is done, typically the main sweet will be served at the end of the meal. And the main sweet that is the sort of traditional sweet is called zenzai. And it is actually a sweet bean soup that has little mochi, little dango in it. And it's hot and sweet, and it's made with azuki beans. And that is served as the sweet before koicha. And once that is done, there's a little break where the people can kind of just get up and move around a little bit, go outside. And when they come back, everything will be set up for koicha. And then the koicha tamai is done and the tea is served. Then there is usucha made after that.
So I've heard you use the word tamai a few times. What does that mean, tamai?
It's a procedure. Really means like being in front of something.
So I saw you do a tamai where you prepared some matcha and you used the kama, the kettle that is in the middle of the room. Now, you mentioned that was moved, and that's the other big event in November for the tea world. So what is that event called, and can you tell me a little bit about what it is?
Okay, it is called Robiraki. Ro means a sunken hearth, and the sunken hearth is closed up during the summertime, and in November it is opened and the kettle is placed in the sunken hearth, either on an electric element, or you can use charcoal to heat the water. So it is the open, Robiraki means the opening of the row. It is the actual event that marks the new year, the new tea year.
November really is the tea new year, which we should celebrate every year with new matcha, and by moving the row, the hearth, into the center of the tea room, as opposed to being away from the guests where it would be too hot in the summer.
Yeah, the shape of the kettle changes. It's a little larger. You want to radiate as much warmth as possible, so the kama can be quite large.
So before you started making the matcha itself, you sifted it. So I actually gave you the matcha that we had today, which is one of the Ooika fresh ground matchas. And inside it comes with a vacuum sealed bag. You're not really supposed to just open that and put it in your tea bowl and drink it, because it would be clumped up.
Yeah.
What do you do when you get a new matcha, whether it's Ooika or really any brand?
It has to be sifted. And typically we have a container, it's metal, and it has a removable sieve that fits inside. And we put the fresh matcha in the top, and then we use this little paddle. It's made of bamboo, and we use that to just work the tea back and forth. The sieve is very, very fine, so it will really break up the compacted tea, because no matter how it is packed, it compacts in the container. You really have to open it up and aerate it somewhat. But you need to have a really good container to keep it in, and it should be metal. And you want a lid that fits really tight over the top, because once it's been sifted, and of course it has to be refrigerated. Matcha has to be refrigerated regardless, whether you're using it or not. I keep mine in the freezer until I actually sift it, then it stays in the refrigerator. And you should never sift more tea than what you're going to use in maybe a week, because it will start to oxidize. And once it starts to oxidize, it starts to get bitter. It will even start to change color. And you want to be very, very aware of that. So when it went into the sieve in the first place, it was compacted. After sieving, then it comes in, we can kind of look at it, that it's really soft.
Very billowy.
And very much so.
When you buy matcha, no matter who you're buying it from, it's important that you make sure that the producer or manufacturer is putting it in a cold environment. And that's why maybe you wouldn't necessarily want to buy matcha from, let's say, a supermarket where it leaves the matcha on the shelf. Because at that point, it's going to warm up, and it really speeds up the process that the particles will break down effectively.
Yeah. For the most part, the tea that you can find in a supermarket is really not intended to be used as a beverage. It is really culinary grade matcha. You can make lots of things with it, like ice cream, or smoothies, or scones, or I've even made matcha tiramisu.
You made me very hungry right now.
But you don't want to drink it because it tends to be very bitter if you make it as a beverage and try to drink it. And I know now that even Costco sells matcha.
Now that matcha is so popular, I wonder how many Americans have actually tasted, let's say, ceremonial grade matcha.
People who book demonstrations here are really amazed by it, and it's not their impression. Their first impression was, I don't know that I'm going to like this. It's up to the host to be very aware of the quality of the tea, because you do not want any of your guests to have a bad experience. And it took us a long time to find a tea from a producer in Japan that I felt would be good for people, primarily people who have never had matcha before, to have a good experience.
Yeah. And by the way, if you're curious what that matcha is, you can click up here because one of my videos that is not out yet, but maybe it is out by the time you watch this one, is me talking about my favorite matchas that are not made by Ooika, and the matcha that they have here at this tea house is on that list.
If you want people to enjoy this as a possible beverage, and on our website we have a list of sources, and Ooika will be, I think it's already on that list.
Oh, I didn't know that. Thank you very
But
much.
if it's not, it will be on the list because, you are going to be local. There are going to be a lot of people here in the metropolitan Philadelphia area, certainly, who will be able to visit your shop or order online from you. And that's good. They don't have to wait for a shipment to come from Japan.
Right. Home field advantage.
Right. Exactly.
Well, great. I'm so happy that you allowed me and everyone else to come watch you make some tea and also to learn about these very interesting events in the tea world that in the West we might not be so familiar with.
The other big event that we have comes in January, and that is the first tea of the calendar new year. And that is the big event of the year.
What is that event called?
It's called Hatsugama.
Hatsugama.
The first kettle. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Drew
Oh,
Sensei. I appreciate
I really
the time.
enjoy doing this for you. We have a website. It's njgreentea.com, and you can visit the website. There's a lot of information there, and you can submit inquiries for a demonstration, and I typically will get back to whoever inquires within a day to let you know what dates are available.
All right, thank you everyone for watching. Be sure to check the description below for relevant links, including links to Drew Sensei's website, where you can, again, book demonstrations and learn more about the world of the art of tea. And be sure to subscribe for more videos on both tea culture and also the production of fresh ground matcha in the United States with Ooika. I'll see you guys next time. Take care. Thank you so much.
Ooika です。